Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Same Old Arsenal podcast. I hope you're all doing really, really well. If you're not, certainly should be after what we saw yesterday. Absolutely fantastic result. We are, of course, sponsored by the fabulous Ruth Beck Arts. If you haven't checked out Ruth's stuff, please do. You can check out her Etsy shop. You can follow her on Twitter. She is making some fantastic bits of Arsenal memorabilia, which are available to purchase. But let's get into what was for me, brilliant result yesterday against a team that caused us so many problems last season. Of course, we know lost to them both home and away, couldn't score a goal against them, and so early on in the season to have got Villa Park out the way with such a good performance, such a good result, I'm absolutely delighted. And to help me talk through last night's game is the fabulous Demi. Demi, we met 7 years ago, I think it was now.
Wow.
2017 at the 12 pins. And I don't know if you remember the game, but it was when we beat Leicester on the opening day of the season 4-3. Long time
Lacazette
ago, wasn't
scored the
it?
first goal.
We just bought Lacazette.
Yeah.
He came in. I think Ramsey got one. Giroud got that one right at the end, but
Yeah.
such a back and forth, topsy-turvy game. But 7 years, I mean, we're quite a different team from that one that we were then, aren't we?
Miles apart. It's we've come a long way. Looking back then, we had quite a few, I'd say, bigger players in terms of maybe careers, but I think you have to look at us now and we're actually just a top team. And the game probably frustrated a lot of fans yesterday at times in the first half, but you look at us and we're very much similar to how a City play at times in terms of the way we control the game, the way we don't let the crowd into the game. We don't let the other team create that many chances. Although yesterday we maybe gave them a couple of chances that were own mistakes. But yeah, miles apart from that day. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you mention City there because I remember not so much yesterday, well, a little bit yesterday, but the Wolves game as well, looking at how we played. And it was one of those games where if I was watching City play that game, you'd be watching it back and thinking, how have they managed to win that? Not because they've not played particularly badly or anything like that, but they've not played, out of their skin to go and win that game. And that's kind of what it was like yesterday. But it was, dare I say, routine, which feels a little bit discreditory of Aston Villa because they were very, very good. But it was never really, at a point in the game yesterday where I felt we were really up against it. I don't know if you kind of shared that feeling.
Well, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I think you're looking at the game. Aston Villa are a good team. They finished fourth, and Emery, one of his best assets is setting up against maybe a team that is meant to beat them. So sitting on the counter, playing that mid block, and they come for the draw. And if they could nick a win, that's what they'll do. Yet, I feel like we have progressed so much in the last couple of years. Maybe the back end of last year we started showing it, where these mid blocks, where these teams want to frustrate us, and we just keep our cool and we play our game very similar to what City does, and we don't panic. There wasn't a time yesterday where I felt like we were pushing it too hard, opening up too many spaces. We kept playing our own football, and eventually we got the breakthrough. And I think first goals this season, very similar to the City games, are going to be really important to us because most teams are going to come and play that style of football. If we get that first goal early, I think we can destroy teams. Otherwise, I think we're going to see a lot of what we did yesterday, where teams sit back and we're going to have to be patient and probe until we get that goal.
I quite like the fact that we're patient, though. I mean, like you said there, there's no urgency, say 30 minutes in, to go too overzealous and push loads of bodies forward. I like the fact that we're kind of trying to feel teams out, that we are being patient with it. And, obviously, the longer the game goes on, the more nervy it gets. But I think we scored at the perfect time yesterday, 68 minutes in with that Trossard goal. And then just look at what happened after that. Aston Villa completely opened up, and great, we got a second goal, but we could have scored another two, like quite easily. It could have been a much, much heavier scoreline. But I'm really happy with the way we've started this season. Very mature performances in the two games. Before we get into like how the game actually played out, team lineup, it was almost identical to what we saw on the opening day against Wolves. We saw Timber come in for Zinchenko, which I think was the right call. And as you saw from the performance, totally justified. But the big blow that we did here before the game is that Gabriel Jesus has picked up yet another injury, and it's getting more and more frustrating. Now, I think there's been some positive reports this evening that he, is on the road to recovery, and it's not as big of an injury as first thought. And I think the likelihood is he'll miss next week, miss the international break, and let's touch wood that's all he misses. But you're looking at our bench yesterday, and I think you kind of, because I know you replied to my tweet that I was getting a little bit tired
Yeah.
of injuries. I was looking at it, I was a little bit worried because you've got Trossard there who came on, as we know, changed the game. But beyond that, in terms of attacking players, you've not really got many, and you take Jesus out of those options off the bench, and it really does look threadbare. I mean, you've got Nelson, you've got Nketiah. I think a lot of Arsenal fans are expecting both of those players to be gone come the end of the transfer window. So, I mean, for you, how big of a blow was it to hear that Jesus is out? Not just obviously for yesterday's game, and thankfully we've gotten through it without him having to be part of the squad, but for him to also likely miss the Brighton game and potentially further fixtures beyond that.
I think it's massive. Like you said, when teams sit this deep, you have to use your whole squad. And when I looked at that bench, it was literally Trossard. Like, you can't look too much beyond that. I think if we are going to win the league this year, Jesus needs to stay fit, and we probably need another forward, especially if Eddie and Nelson go, which even if they don't, you don't really want to be relying on those two like for a lot of minutes. Eddie, Nelson both scored important goals for us over the last couple of years. But I think realistically, if we're going to win the league, we need to bring in another forward, and we need to be relying on Jesus. Even Partey and Zinchenko, the players that have been injured over the last few years, hopefully stay fit. But particularly Jesus, because it is worrying, really worrying. Trossard come in and made a big, big impact. But if you have to rely on one person every week, it's going to be a bit risky throughout season, especially if Martinelli didn't play particularly well. So I'd assume that Trossard will probably start the next game. And all of a sudden, if you're now looking to bring on maybe a Martinelli that's not as much in form, that makes the substitution maybe even weaker. So you could look at that bench and next week, and it could be even weaker than it was this week if Jesus isn't there and we haven't got enough forward. So yeah, it's a big worry for me.
We'll have Nico Williams this time next week, mate. So don't worry about that. It's a pipe dream, but it would be absolutely lovely if we could pull off kind of a Mesut Ozil deadline day signing and just have him there on the bench for the game against Brighton. It's not going to happen, by the way, so I don't want to get any listeners too excited, but it would be, that would be absolutely beautiful. But one player that I do want to talk about who was in the starting 11 that was really positive was Jurrien Timber. I thought he was excellent yesterday. Really, really pleased with his performance, playing at left back where he started his Arsenal career. And it's easy to forget that although he's played the majority of his football for Arsenal at left back, at Ajax, he was playing right centre back, he was playing right back. And I just thought he slotted in so naturally, looks so comfortable in midfield, is such an elegant and skillful player as well. You wouldn't think that he's just coming off the back of an ACL injury, would you?
No, not at all. And he played most of his preseason at centre back as well. So it's not even like he was playing preseason at left back. I thought he was really good, really, really good. And I think the biggest testament you can say to Timber is Bailey looked like half the player than what he did last year. When we played him last year, he terrorized Zinchenko at times down that right. And we looked really, really, it was an area that we looked a bit suspect in. And that didn't happen. And I think you could tell there was a few times where players were pointing in the right direction for maybe Timber to step in and step out, and he's probably going to have to learn that role. But all the signs there were that he defensively, he really, really made us look solid. And when he was on the ball, when he was in the middle of the pitch, he was comfortable. Although I still don't think he's long term is going to be left back. I really don't. I think he's coming to support White and probably cover for the centre backs when needed. But he's more than capable to play left back for sure.
Well, it's a really nice problem to have, isn't it? Because although we're sat here talking about us needing a forward, which I think a lot of Arsenal fans will agree we do, defensively, we are exceedingly healthy. When you look at our options in terms of fullback, where you've got White, Calafiori, Timber, of course, Zinchenko. I mean, have I mentioned Kivior? I mean,
Tomiyasu.
yeah, Tomiyasu, who's injured, and I don't think anyone's remotely talking about at the minute because we just don't really need him. I mean, where does he even fit into the matchday squad? But it's very easy to forget that towards the end of last season, he was such a pivotal player. And again, he's another one that kind of falls into the Jesus, Partey, even Zinchenko category. It is frustrating that we've got such good players that are injured all the time. It really reminds me of, I'm sure you remember, like 2008-10 periods where you'd always have players like Van Persie, Fabregas, Diaby, it's even Sanya at times. Like these guys that would just constantly break down after 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games. But hopefully, we can get them back if we can have a really healthy squad, and more importantly than we did last season, rotate well, because we've got the options to do that now. And I really hope we start to see that utilised a bit more. But it was a strong team lineup yesterday. Talk me through the first half then, because it was not glamorous. It wasn't bad either. I mean, we had that really good chance through Bukayo Saka, really good save from Emi Martinez, but Villa should have been 1-0 up, shouldn't they?
100%, yeah. Very sloppy. I think Gabriel has this in him. When his first touch isn't on point, like you can see the second touch is maybe a little bit dodgy, or the pass after it isn't as crisp as you'd like. And that first touch, he looked up, he wasn't sure where he was going. They pressed us, and Ollie Watkins last year would have scored that. He had a pre-season, he probably scores that. We got very, very lucky there. But apart from that, though, I mean, that was a mistake by us. They did press us quite well, but I think that's more on Gabriel than Aston Villa. Apart from that, I think it was a very controlled first half. We didn't do a lot with the ball, but also we just kept them at bay. And I think most importantly, which I think we've done very well on the road over the last 18 months, is we keep the fans quiet a lot of the time. We don't give too many big chances away where the fans can really get behind them. Villa Park is one of the toughest places to go from a fan perspective. They really get behind their team. All I heard on the TV was the Arsenal away fans for most of that probably the first 60 to 70 minutes. And then when we scored again, it was all us. And I think that's it's something that we do really, really well. Something that Man City does. It bores the opposition fans into not caring and not getting behind their team. But Saka could have easily nicked one as well. That was a fantastic save by Emi Martinez. Hate to say it, but he got down low, ball bouncing just before the glove. Really good save. And that's Saka at his best when he cuts in like that. So yeah, look, not the best half, but I think controlled. And I think that's what Arteta will want in some of these tough away games is not go too helter-skelter, keep it tight, knowing that we will grow into the game.
And there's a real maturity to that sense of lulling the opposition fans to sleep almost. And like you say, it's something that City do really, really well. But does it show that this Arsenal team is getting that bit more experience in these situations? Because it doesn't feel like too long ago when we went to Liverpool and there was that incident with Xhaka where we were so in control of that game. And that just changed everything, really riled up the fans, and suddenly Anfield came alive. We're not really giving other teams an opportunity to let their crowds into the game. I mean, even after that incident with Saliba, McGinn, and Ben White, that could have really, sparked something, but it didn't, and we didn't let it become something. So I think that's a really good point you make about us having that ability to nullify the crowd so early.
Yeah, and I think you said it earlier, like as the game goes on, you get a bit nervous. I don't think these Arsenal players do. I think this year they are fully in belief of themselves that they can win this league and that they deserve to be at the top. Like, I don't sense for a second that they're panicking. If we get to 60 minutes, it's 0-0, that they're panicking and they're rushing to score a goal. They seem very calm on the ball and playing their own game and trusting what their tactics or what Arteta told them to do. That said, though, you mentioned the Ben White moment. It's probably my favourite part of the game. That and the Raya save. I absolutely love Ben White. Like, he's fast becoming my favourite player. I'm very much an attacking person like that. All my favourite players have always been someone that sticks the ball in the back of the net. But I love him. Absolutely love him. The shithousery is absolutely brilliant. Kick the ball at Saliba. No, within a split second, he's like, there. No, bang.
Yeah, what I loved about that the most was there was just no hesitation whatsoever. He
No.
was just like, right, okay, that's how it is it? I'm going to hit this right back at you, and he's just so nonchalant with it. Like he is the exact type of player you want in your team that is very good at football to begin with, very dependable, very reliable, very good at what he does. But in terms of a team player, keeps his head down, works really hard, always backs up anyone else in the squad. Yeah, I think I'm with you. Like there's a lot of players that I like in this Arsenal team, but Ben White is just one of my favourites. Like he
Mm.
is, he's just absolutely fantastic. But it wasn't, it wasn't a rock and roll first half, was it? Apart from that moment, both teams had chances. Both teams could have scored, but I suppose for the neutral, it was very much a case of Arsenal trying to feel Aston Villa out. They set up, with that mid-low block. And I'm not sure if you watched Match of the Day last night, but they made a really good point of how Villa were keeping, the likes of Onana and Tielemans kind of on Partey. They weren't allowing us to play through the lines. If you look at a lot of our play in the first half, we were just playing the ball out wide, just trying to work out what to do with it.
Mm.
And we weren't playing it as progressively through the lines as we were in the second half when Emery made those changes and brought on the likes of Jacob Ramsey. One player that did cause us a lot of problems, though, was Morgan Rogers. I'd be honest, I didn't really know a lot about him until Villa signed him, and I certainly know a lot more about him after yesterday's game. But he was, fantastic at pressing us, at just being direct and running at us. I wanted to talk about Partey a little bit later on, but I think it's interesting to talk about him at this point in the game because there were a few moments where he did quite easily get spun, for use of a better term, by Morgan Rogers. But I think we saw the best, and I don't want to say the worst, but we didn't see Partey at his absolute best yesterday. But I think there were a lot of positives to take from his performance. I think it's obvious with a player like him that physically you are starting to see an individual coming towards not the twilight, but certainly a player that's best days are made behind him. But I don't know about you, Dem, but I thought his passing yesterday, his forward passing, particularly in the second half, was absolutely exceptional.
The way he breaks lines is unbelievable. If we can keep that party and get legs around him, then he's going to be a very, very useful player for us. What I love most about Partey is how quickly he finds Saka and Odegaard. He's the only person in our team that he seems to get the ball, and the first people he looks for are those two players, and they are our two best players. So for me, when he's on the ball and he's playing like that, he has to start. But as you said, the other side to it is, and I don't know how much this is to do just putting on Partey because Rodgers also ran past Rice, and although Rice hasn't looked himself this season, not many players do that. He bounced off of Rice a couple of times, so maybe Rodgers just had a really good game. But it is a worry. One of the things I would say with Partey though, since he's come back into our team, we've looked a lot more open and a little bit more suspect transitions. I think when Rice plays at six, we struggle a little bit more on the ball progression side because he's not as maybe punchy with his passes through the lines as what Partey is, but he definitely sniffs out danger a lot more in that sixth position and keeps us a little bit tighter on those transitions. So I think it is that balance between some games are going to be better for Rice and others for Partey. But yeah, I think keeping him fit and keeping him available for some games is really important.
Yeah, and like Kevin Harold says in the chat here, Partey needs good movement in front of him and he will find those players. And exactly like you were saying there, his first instinct is always to pass to Erdegaard, to Saka. He In terms of his forward passing, for me, there's no one really better in the squad from that position. But it is, like you say, those transitions that really would worry me. I'm not sure if
Mm,
you caught the Liverpool-Brentford game today, but the
yeah,
blistering counter-attack for their first goal, you can't help but think if Partey was in that position, there's just no way he's going to be keeping up with players like Luis Diaz or Diogo Jota. And against better opposition, then that would worry me unless we were to revert to a sort of system that we saw at times last season with Declan Rice and Jorginho. And we know Jorginho has similar problems like Partey, where he's not really got the physical and pace side of the game anymore, but he's got that technical ability. If we were to play them more as a double pivot, I think that would work. But I think what you say about Rice being bypassed by Rodgers and not really having an electric start to the season like he did last year is a really valid point as well, because he's not been. I've not looked at Rice and thought, yeah, he's playing pretty poorly, because he's not. It's not like he's misplacing passes or going into tackles and missing them, but he's just been quiet. He's been a bit subdued. Like I'd say, these first two games have been 6 out of 10s for him. Well, they've just been average, which is unusual for Declan Rice, because normally he's giving you a bare minimum of 7.5, 8 out of 10 performance. Do you think that's down to him maybe playing in this left 8 role, which I think was so good for him towards the end of last season, his ability to win the ball higher up the pitch? Or do you think it's just because he is having a bit of a hangover from the Euros?
I think it's a bit of both. I think particularly yesterday we played against a team with a mid block, and I don't think there was much space for him to really open up his legs in either the press or moving forward. He did it a couple of times. He got behind and put one really, really good cross from the byline. I can't remember who it went to. But I also don't think he's come back fit. He's not had a pre-season. You look at Man City. Man City, Rodri hasn't been in the squad. Foden and John Stones have played 40 minutes maybe between them all over the two games. And we've had to start Saka and Rodri. Saka and Rice. And
It'd be nice if we had Rodri as well, wouldn't it?
yeah, it would. We wouldn't have to play Partey then, would we? But no, so we've had to play both of those, and I think that makes a big difference. And it could make a really big difference come the end of the season and how fresh we are as a squad. So yeah, I'm hoping it's not going to happen, but Saka and Rice don't go away for the international break, and we can have their feet up for 2 weeks and get some energy back in Rice, because he's not looked the same energy levels as he has at the start of last year. He just looks a little bit off. Not bad, like you said, but it's just not been the same player as we know he can be.
Yeah, it would be really, really nice if we could give Saka and Rice a rest, but it's not going to happen, is it? Sadly, I struggle to see with the Nations League, which everyone really cares about. Yeah, we're definitely going to be seeing those guys shipped off to play in those games, which is just unnecessary and exceedingly frustrating given the seasons they've had, where they've virtually not had a break. But before we move on from this topic, with Mikel Merino more than likely coming in at this point, what would you be looking to do with the midfield? Because we're signing a 28-year-old who has played pretty much every single game for Real Sociedad over the past couple of seasons. Is he coming straight into the starting 11? Because I don't think he's going to change this midfield three at the minute that we've got of Partey, Rice, Ødegaard, which, has seen 2 wins, 2 clean sheets, 2 good performances. But like we've already alluded to, the need for rest of Declan Rice, the worrying transitions against Thomas Partey. Do you think there's a case for when Merino does come in? I don't think it will happen against Brighton, but for the following games, we could see him coming into the midfield and maybe Rice moving back into 6?
I think long term that will happen. Arteta's a quite conservative manager. I mean, he built his whole team from the back. I don't see for Spurs away or Man City away him changing something that has worked. Most of the time, Arteta normally sticks with something that's working. I personally think long term it would be Rice at the 6, and then Mourinho and Ødegaard as the 3. But particularly with Partey's injury record, I think you can then rotate him in for certain games. So your big 6 are home and away. You're probably going to go Rice and Partey, a bit more stable. But then the bottom half of the teams, you want someone a bit more attacking. I noticed it earlier. You watch Liverpool, you watch Man City, and the amount of attackers they have compared to defenders. I mean, you looked at our team yesterday. You had Raya, the 4 at the back, then you had Partey and Rice. That's 7 players out of the 11 that are quite more defensive minded than attacking. And I think against the bottom half teams, if we could fit another attacking player in, that would be the way I'd go. But as I said to you earlier, I know Ben White's probably one of my favourite players now, but I've always leaned on the attack rather than defence. Whether Arteta does that is another matter. But yeah, I think for me, Mourinho, Ødegaard and Rice would be the midfield I'd lean to probably after the City and Spurs games.
It's nice to have those options though, isn't it? Because let's not forget we've got Jorginho in the squad as well, who's not played a single minute in the Premier League. We could find ourselves in situations where we might want to play a midfield three of Jorginho, Marino, and Martin Odegaard. And that is an experienced, good midfield, which you could arguably play against. I don't want to say lesser sides, but sides that you would expect to beat. Or if you want to play that in a Champions League game or a League Cup game, you could play Rice in the 8 in one game, bring him back to 6 in another game. But I think the reason I bring it up is because we've got these really tricky games coming up after the international break. We've got Spurs away, we've got City away. And I think it's so important that we get the midfield right going into those games. It's not like we've got, we're not deep enough into the season to know exactly what our best 11 is. We've seen, more or less the same team play in these opening 2 games. But I would worry potentially about Partey going to City or Spurs away and, him getting lost in those transitions against better quality of opposition. But then at the same time, part of me is thinking there's no way that Arteta is going to throw Marino into those games. So I think it's a real headache. Like, it's a nice problem to have those options. But I mean, I don't want to dwell on this topic too long, but do you see it that kind of the same way I do, that, there's a little bit of hesitation with those games coming up, that we need to get the midfield right early on?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I wouldn't even put it past Arteta looking at maybe going back to Jorginho, Rice in the midfield for the City away game, because those two, particularly in some big away games, have put in some really good performances. So having those options is really, really important. However, I think Arteta is working. For me, throughout his tenure, he seems to stick. He doesn't rotate as much as what, maybe that's because of the players we've had, but he leans into what's working. So I think if we win against Brighton with the same team, I think that's probably what's going to start against Spurs away. But yeah, I think the midfield is such a key battle, especially Man City away. If they've got Rodri back, if they've got Gundogan, you need that midfield battle won, because otherwise, if they win that battle at home, them playing at home, it could be a very, very long day for us in terms of them putting pressure on us. Very similar like they did last year, where we had to dig deep, defend well, and we nicked a draw.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I don't want to stay on this topic for too long, but I know at the minute we're lining up with Partey as the deepest player, Odegaard and Rice playing slightly ahead of him. But I think we could see that same midfield, and some of us would have reservations about it. But all you've got to do, really, like we did last season in these big games when Rice was playing with Jorginho, just drop him back a little bit. And suddenly you've got Rice being that bit more protective for Partey. And if you've got Timber patrolling the midfield like he did yesterday, or Calafiori, then I would hope that we're covered adequately to deal with those transitions. But we could quite easily do an entire hour-long podcast on Arsenal's midfield, because with Marino coming in, we just have so many options to choose from. But I'm not going to stay on this topic any longer, because we do need to talk about what was that fantastic second half from Arsenal yesterday. And once again, a golden chance falls to Ollie Watkins, who definitely should have put Villa 1-0 up in this instance if it wasn't for a brilliant save from David Raya. Ball comes in from Onana, takes a deflection, really fortunate in the way it hits the crossbar, and then falls back into the path of Watkins. But that reactionary save from David Raya, I mean, I'm not sure if you saw his post-match interview where he said that's not the best save of his career. It's like, come on now, it's got to be up there. But yeah, unbelievable, because I thought, looking at that in real time, I was like, well, that's a goal. That's gone in. But enormous game-changing moment that was, wasn't it?
Yeah. How he gets up, I don't know. I don't know if you saw one of the replays from behind the goal where he hits the ground hard, and as he hits and he bounces up, that's when Ollie Watkins heads the ball, and he still manages to get up and get a hand to it, and a strong hand, and gets it away again.
Yeah, because it could have been quite easily fallen back to Bailey, who was waiting there.
Yeah. I mean, look, how many times have you seen that sort of where someone gets up, makes a save, and it falls within the 6-yard box and someone tucks it away again? Like, the fact he got such a strong hand, I thought his start to the season has been unbelievable, to be fair. Even in the late in the second half, I don't know if it was 1-0 up or 2-0 up, when they had a couple of corners and they were all over him, and he come out with that big punch and cleared it all the way well outside the box.
And let's not forget the save he made against Larson last weekend.
Yeah,
in his 2 games, 2 monumental saves.
The first half as well, when Rodgers wiggled past Partey and Rice and got to the box and cut it back, and he put big hand out and then jumps on the ball. That was important as well, because if that gets past, I think it was Gabriel and Ollie Watkins that were going to be fighting to try and get a toe to that. Like I think he's been really, really good for us, like since he's signed, but particularly this year, I think last year he had to come in, and the weight of proving himself against a fan favourite probably weighed on him a little in the
He had a
first
few
few
shaky
games.
moments, didn't he? I remember distinctly
Yeah,
against Lons away in the Champions League, and there were a
yeah,
couple of
and Man
games like
City.
it. Yeah, where he just gave the ball like to the
Yeah,
opposition. But I'd say for the entirety of 2024, I can't really think of him putting a foot wrong at any point.
no, I, I, I think last when he first joined, I looked at him and he didn't look like he was. He didn't look like he was our number one. Like whenever you saw him in goal, he didn't look assured. I now look at him and he just looks. He stands there and he goes, "I am Arsenal's number one." I mean, it makes a big difference when you're confident, especially as a goalkeeper. Very similar to strikers. I honestly, I've been very impressed with him, and this year alone, he's probably saved us, well, potentially 6 points there. Because I think if we could go 1-0 down against Villa, it's a very different game. We could have easily been 2-0 down as well. So yeah, big save, big performance, and he was definitely man of the match for me.
Yeah, and it's so nice to have a literal last line of defense that you can
Mm,
rely on, because not only have we got a back four that teams really struggle to get past, but if they do get past them, they've then got one more hurdle to jump over, and that is trying to beat David Raya, which
yeah.
he is proving it is definitely no easy task. But you mentioned confidence there. He's a player that is the absolute epitome of it at the minute. One player that probably isn't, and was subbed yesterday for what turned out to be the match winner. Gabriel Martinelli looks a shadow of himself at the minute, mate. It's worrying, and it's a real shame, because we know how good he is. We know how
Mm,
explosive he can be, but I just felt like he was very lost yesterday. He looks, bereft of confidence. He's not being as direct as he used to be. And his decision making in the final third is just quite poor. I remember there was one instance where he had acres of time, acres of space, and he just ran down the left and ended up just turning around and passing it backwards. And that is not Gabriel Martinelli. Like, he should be putting
mm.
that ball into the box. He should be, trying to take a shot on himself, but he's just kind of going down the left-hand channel, doing pirouettes. And I don't think he was terrible yesterday. I think I should really make that clear. He wasn't awful, but he's a long way away from the player we know he can be. And is that a worry for you?
Yeah, it is, and I think it's been a big worry for probably since Christmas. He started to pick up a bit of form last year before his injury, but since he's come back, I just don't think he's been the same player. And if Arteta wants to be ruthless in our attacking line, I think he's the person you probably go out and try and replace. You probably go and get a starting left wing and let him fight it out. And then whoever wins kind of wins the jersey, similar to what he done with Raya and Ramsdale. Um, I I believe he can get back to that level, but at the moment he looks so low on confidence.
Well, this is the
I was
thing. Like,
listening to
sorry to interrupt you, mate, but I've not really seen Gabriel Martinelli play like badly. Like, I remember when he first came through at 18, and I thought in all of those games, I remember he scored so early on in the Europa League when Emery was giving him a chance, and he just looked in every game like a really, really good player.
mm,
Even going back to that game against Chelsea where he ran the entire length of the pitch and put it past the keeper. Um, I've always thought he's a really good player. He then had that injury, was brought back a little bit. We never saw him in the starting lineup under Arteta, and he was gradually phased into the team. And ever since then, I thought, the 2 seasons before the one just gone, I thought he was excellent in 2022,
mm.
23 and 21, 22. I thought in both those seasons he was a really good, dependable player. But it's just this season. And it's interesting because I thought he was a very important player in those games last campaign where we were blowing teams away. Like, he was contributing, looking really dangerous. Then he had a slight knock. And since then, he's just not looked himself. And do you think it's now time to take him out of the limelight almost and bring in the guy that won us the game yesterday?
I think you have to pick Trossard in the next game. But I think if you have a team that's based on if you perform well, you play, then Trossard has to start. He's come on and scored the winner and changed the game for us. I think it's difficult because Arteta clearly wants someone on that left wing to hold the width and have pace. And for everything that Trossard does well, that's not really his game. He's much more of a inside player that wants to come into the goal or closer to the middle of the pitch to kind of uh, interact with other players. And Trossard's best skill is when he just comes alive in the box. He is probably the closest we've had as a fox in a box for years. Like he really does come alive. Sometimes he frustrates me a little bit because his touch outside the box is nowhere near as clean, but he gets inside that box and he just comes alive and he has a great finish on him. So yeah, I think you have to go Trossard, give him a game. I mean, by that celebration alone, I think it's probably time he starts because we don't want him sulking too much on the bench. Although if he comes on every time sulking and scores, I mean, we probably won't complain too much as fans. But yeah, I think it's time for him to give him a start, see how he can to get on, and maybe give Gabriel 20 minutes at the end against a tired left back and see if that can maybe open up some more spaces and he nicks a goal to give his confidence a boost that's needed.
Yeah, and I think that might be the way to go. I think it has to be the way to go for Brighton because Trossard, I think he's done enough to show that I mean, even in pre-season, he's done enough to show that he should be starting in that left wing berth in a minute. But I remember when Martinelli was out of the team for a little bit at the start of last season, and I think this was due to injury rather than lack of form, but he came in off the bench against Manchester City, I think, at half time.
Yeah.
And he scored that goal, massive deflection, of course, but that was the goal that won the game. And I thought he was the game-changing player in that match. So we all know Martinelli's got the ability, but as young players so often go through, he's going through a bit of a lack of form. It happens, and I really hope that he can get back to his best, and I'm sure he will. And it's just a really nice position to be in, that we've got kind of a ready-made 29-year-old winger on the bench who yesterday proved to be decisive with that goal. Brilliant time to score, wasn't it, Dem? 68 minutes in, really great pass initially. I think it was from Thomas Partey, playing it through the lines. Bukayo Saka on the verge of taking it out of play. Brilliant ball back through. Bit of clumsy defending from Villa, it has to be said. And it wasn't the easiest of finishes for Trossard because it does take a slight nick off one of the Aston Villa defenders, but he still manages to wrap his foot around it. Not the most powerful of finishes, but the placement, superb. And that was, just a brilliant time to score and a brilliant goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, what I love most about Trossard in those situations is he gets across the player. Like if you watched his movement, he only took a little step to the right, but it was just enough for him to be across the Aston Villa defender to get his shot across. And then he just puts it straight back across goal. And he gives Martinez absolutely no chance. He's wrong-footed, or his weight's all going the wrong way. And Trossard does that a lot. A lot of his finishes, as the ball comes across, he will put it into the opposite corner where the keeper's going the opposite way. Yeah, really, really good goal. I quite liked it, the Odegaard ball through, where Saka was being held by the player and he still managed to shrug him off and get to the byline.
He really made Digne look a fool, didn't he? It just
I really like that.
It's one aspect of Saka's game that a lot of us kind of tend to overlook. He is so strong, so strong.
Holds the ball up so well.
Yeah, he's just brilliant in those situations, isn't he? But not too long after that, we alluded to it earlier. The game really started to open up at that point because Villa, they needed a goal. They needed to get back into the game. They brought on John Duran. And I think that just really played into our hands because we just were, not picking them off, but we were certainly seeing more openings, playing it through the lines of ease at times. And the second goal felt inevitable. And I have to say, I'm really pleased that Thomas Partey got it because he's had a really tough year. It has to be said, barely featured last season, came in towards the end. Obviously, has had his critics over the summer. A lot of people saying that he should be sold, should be moved on. So obviously been all that speculation of him moving on to Saudi. But it looks like he's going to be remaining at Arsenal. Again, not the most powerful finishes, but placement perfect. Martinez, arguably should have saved it, but we'll save that conversation for another day. But I mean, for his confidence, I think his celebration just showed a man that was so relieved to have scored and to show that, he can still contribute something to this Arsenal team. So for him, but also for Arsenal to wrap it off at 2-0, really good, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it's a nice pass into the goal. Martinez should have saved it, let's be honest. But it had the power on it and it was just enough in the corner that caused him problems. And he deserved it, honestly. On the ball yesterday, he was so good. Like there was, and even off the ball in the first half, I actually think he played quite well. I mean, as the game went on and it stretched a little bit, that's when sometimes he gets caught out a little bit. But overall, I think it's probably the best party game we've seen for a while, and he fully deserved that goal because I thought he was out of all of our build-up play, he was the one person that always takes chances, always takes risks, and it is a big risk when you're playing six. When you're trying to punch the ball through the lines, you get that wrong, and the other team's on a counter. So yeah, fully deserved. Really, really happy for him. I think you could tell by the celebrations of everyone as well. They were really pleased with him. It's always nice to see.
Absolutely. And we should have had one more, shouldn't we?
We
Martin
should have,
Odegaard
yeah.
just cannot seem to score at Villa Park. It's such a shame, wasn't it? Because I'd have loved the 3-0. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't think we did enough to merit a 3-0 scoreline, and it probably would have been a bit unjust on Aston Villa. But, to have buried them after the couple of games that we had against them last year, and you're thinking it's fallen to Odegaard in that position, that's a goal. That's got to be a goal. But I don't think he could have hit it any higher, could he, in that
No,
situation?
he just needed to. He didn't really need to put any power on it because the ball back had a lot of pace on it. But yeah, he absolutely skied that. He'd have got 3 points in rugby, wouldn't he? It'd have been right over a nice little kick there. But yeah, it's yeah, he's not going to score at Villa Park for a while, is he? He really doesn't have much luck.
No, but thankfully, look, we don't need him to because we've got the game out of the way. We've won 2-0. And before we move on from talking about the game itself, one player that we did get to see make his Arsenal debut for the last 10, 15 minutes, Calafiori, I thought he was impeccable when he came on. I don't want to, over-egg it, but I thought everything he did was so good. His tackling, his passing, his reading of the game, just slotted in perfectly, didn't he?
He looks strong, doesn't he?
Hmm.
Looks really strong,
And
physically
it's
imposing.
what's horrible, Dem, that will make you feel old that he was born in 2002.
Wow. Yeah, that does make me feel old. Thanks for
So
that.
it's not just you, mate. It's me now as well.
No. But yeah, he looks physically imposing. When Martinez and those two Aston Villa defenders were, God knows what they were trying to do, he just brushed them off and didn't seem bothered at all. I think he's going to be our starting left back by the end of the year. I really do. I think we found our four big, good ball playing defenders where no attackers want to go up against them. And Zinchenko is probably going to be the person that comes on if we're chasing a game 15, 20 minutes to go, or if we're playing maybe the bottom 3, 4 teams. But I think Calafiori is going to be the starting left back
Yeah, I
by
think
the end of the season.
give it a bit of time, especially
Mm,
in those big away games. From what I saw, okay, it was only 10, 15 minutes, but he just looks perfect for that role.
yeah.
What again? I'm going off topic here, but what do you think it means for someone like Jakub Kivior? Because we've obviously heard that he, throughout the summer, rumblings of him, potentially getting a move back to Serie A, whether it's for a permanent deal, whether it's for a loan. He was in the squad yesterday. I still think he's a really useful player to have around. Whilst we've got someone like Tomiyasu, who, if he could stay fit, I'd be one of the first people to say, let's move Kivior on. But whilst we can't guarantee that with Tomiyasu, unfortunately,
Mm.
what would you be looking to do with someone like him? Because we know he can play left back, he can play left centre back. And there were times last season where he looked a little bit out of place. The game against Bayern Munich at home in the Champions League is the one that I'd point to. But in those games where we were brushing teams aside with ease, he was a big part of that. And I think it's, quite easy to forget that he is a very good player still.
Yeah, personally, I've never really warmed to him, maybe as much as others have. Don't get me wrong, I don't think he's a bad player, but I don't think he's at the level for us to push on and win a Premier League if he's
But
going
as
to
a
be playing
squad
lots of
player,
minutes.
do you think?
Yeah, I think if Tomiyasu's fit, then he doesn't play. But like you said, it's a big if, right? And because of that, if he does stay around, then there could be minutes in the league for him, or what, Carabao Cup, FA Cup. There definitely could be games that he could play. If he's just a squad player, there's nothing wrong with that. Like he's good enough. I think if Tomiyasu stays fit, I think there's money there to be had that we could reinvest in the squad elsewhere. Um, it's a big if though, because unfortunately Tomiyasu, similar to Partey, similar to Jesus, the easiest way to predict the future is look at the past, and all three of those are big injury risks. So God knows if think that's one for Arteta to decide rather than me. But I think if Tomiyasu stayed fit, I'd probably move him on. If not, then he'll play minutes throughout the season for sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, we've spoken a lot about the defence, rightly so, throughout the course of this podcast. And I don't think anything quite sums up just how good our defence is at the minute than that Saliba tackle on Ramsey towards the end of the game. I mean, the pace he has to get back and make that challenge. And I love the celebration with that as well. Not just from him, but from Raya, from Ben White. You can even see Thomas Partey giving a fist in the air in the background. 3 away goals we've conceded in the Premier League.
I was about to say that.
It's mental. It's absolutely crazy. I've never felt so confident in an Arsenal defence in a long, long time. And honestly, the reason I'm so almost flabbergasted by how good we are at the back is because it doesn't feel like long ago that we were seeing defences formed of Rob Holding, Kolasinac, Callum Chambers, Mustafi, Socrates. And look at us now. Like, how much is that back line worth? I mean, don't answer that because it's an impossible question and we don't want to sell them. But, I mean, to have such a good defence, we're truly blessed, aren't we?
Unbelievable. I mean, I saw the stats today. I think it's like, what is it, like 3 goals conceded in 2024 away from home?
Yep.
That's outrageous. That really is. Like, Saliba is so good. We should be, not even joking, we should be doubling his wages and signing him to 10-year contract. Like, we need him signed longer terms than what he's got right now. Because every big club in the world is going to come knocking in 2 years' time.
He has that horrible essence of a Perez Galactico signing.
Don't say it.
Yeah, I don't want to say, but everything about him screams Real Madrid.
Real Madrid,
it does. 4 or 5 years.
It really does. Honestly, I think 2 years' time, I can see it happening. I can see them coming knocking. If we haven't won the Champions League or the league, I think he goes. But he is. I mean, look, I don't watch as much Spanish football or Italian football as I used to. I watch all the Premier League games. But for me, he's top 3 centre backs in the world. Like, and I say top 3 just because I don't watch enough of football to really say he's number 1. But my God, he's good. And I'm glad he plays for us because
and so is the guy alongside him. Although he had a little bit of a mare with that, Watkins chance in the first half, he, deserves just as many plaudits because that pass he played through over the top.
Trossard.
Yeah, I mean that's unbelievable. I mean, no one talks about Gabriel's passing ability, but he is so good at those balls out from the back. And just to wrap up before we go on to a few questions, Dem. This is such a big win so early on in the season. Villa Park away is not a game that I would want to be coming in March, April or May. So to have got it out the way in not even September, in August, I mean, it's a huge sigh of relief. And I'm kind of glad in a way that we've got Spurs away and City away in the coming weeks and months as well, because, we can put them behind us. And I'm not saying that the home games against these opposition will be any easier, but it takes the pressure off a little bit to have those games behind us. But this one particularly, because we know they were a bogey team for us last year. We know we've not done particularly well against our former manager, Unai Emery. I'm just so glad we've won it.
Yeah, same. I think this game was so important for so many reasons. Like you said, last year, 0 points, 0 goals. Although actually, I think we played quite well in the home game against them. We were just unlucky we didn't tuck it away in the first. Well, Trossard, I think, missed quite a good opportunity. But I think more importantly, with Spurs and City coming up, we couldn't drop points. We had to get 6 points on the board from the first 2 games. We have to beat Brighton at the weekend because look, I don't want to say we won't win both those games, but they're 2 tough away games. And there's lots of worlds where we come away with maybe 4 points or 3 points, and we couldn't drop points against Aston Villa yesterday, and we have to beat Brighton. If we can go into the international break with 9 points with the games we've had, particularly Villa away, be over the moon. And it really sets us up nicely to go to Spurs, give them a good bashing, and then hopefully play well against City.
Yeah, and it's not an easy start. I mean, look, we know we've got those tough games against Spurs and City away, but Villa away is a tough game. I'm really confident that they're going to take points off the likes of City, Liverpool, United, Spurs, Chelsea. That is a tough ground to go to against a very good team that are rightly in the Champions League. And all the plaudits to Emery and what he's done there, because I think he's doing an absolutely fantastic job. But just before I let you go, Dan, we've got a couple of quick questions to run through. From Barry Byrne. Big win, delighted. However, thought we got away with it. We looked sluggish in attack, not just Martinelli, fought a lot of overhit passes, but delighted we won. Inclined to agree with that?
I don't think we got away with it. We definitely got away with the Ollie Watkins chance, but I honestly think we controlled the game quite well, and we grew into the game. And once Trossard scored, I thought it was all us. But yeah, delighted with the win. 3 points is 3 points. It doesn't matter how it comes.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we necessarily look sluggish. I see what you're saying, Barry, that it was not quite as fluid as we would like it in times, but I think you saw the best version of Arsenal as soon as that Trossard goal went in. And if you just look at the statistics, I think we edged it. We deserved to get over the line, and no, I don't think we got away with it. I think we did more than enough to win that game. Next one from Kevin Harold, hearing that Nketiah to Nottingham Forest deal was broken down. Yeah, David Ornstein has just repeated that. And Nketiah, I've got nothing against Nketiah whatsoever. Like, I think he's been a really good servant to Arsenal throughout this whole transfer. He's not complained. He's been on the bench in these games. He's, a player that I've got a lot of admiration and respect for. But it is quite frustrating that we saw this deal to Marseille collapse. It was going back and forth, looked like a sure thing. To Forest, the exact same scenario. We thought that was a sure thing. We even had him coming quite close to joining Bournemouth as well. So we're to believe. I don't want to say how we're going to get rid of him, because I don't want to wish him out of the club, but he is a player that we need to move on. It'll be frustrating if we don't get any money in for him this window. But given the way things are going, Dem, I really struggle to see us getting a sizable transfer fee for him at this point. And the way I see it going, I think it's quite likely that he could leave on loan.
Apparently, there's 2 English clubs and a foreign club that are still interested, and Palace are looking at doing a loan with obligation. That's the last thing I saw on Twitter before we jumped on. But yeah, I think the loan of obligation is probably where we go from here, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think that would be a disaster either. He needs to get minutes.
Yeah, it's only a disaster if it stops us bringing in a forward for PSR reasons. If it doesn't, then who really cares? Like, if we get the money next season or this season. But if it does stop us getting that forward in because we can't afford it, or because we need to wait another year for PSR reasons, then that, I think, is it impacts us quite a lot. Because as you said at the beginning, our bench at the beginning of the Villa game wasn't the best. And we really do need another forward, whether that's the left, right, or centre, or someone that can play all 3.
Yeah, I think we're okay on the PSR side of things. Like, I'm not an accountant of Arsenal by any means, but I think from what I understand, we are pretty comfortable, and we could, if we wanted to, we could bring in a sizable transfer if we wanted to. I think it's more just a case of, with Nketiah, we need to move him on, number one, because he needs minutes. I think even if we don't sign anyone, I really struggle to see where he's going to get minutes, because let's say Jesus does come back after the international break. He would be the one that comes on off the bench. For the League Cup games, you're probably going to play a Jesus that isn't starting the Premier League games. So I just don't see where he gets minutes. So yeah, let's hope we can get a deal wrapped up. But with 5 days left of the transfer window, I mean, it's going to be tight. But we all know there's lots of twists and turns. This one from Andy Love. Our penultimate question is, in my opinion, Martinelli needs to be tried as an inside forward. His confidence is low as a winger. In Jesus' position, he would get more chances inside the box, and he's a good finisher. Would you be open to playing him as centre forward?
Do you know what? I've always said I can imagine him up top. I think he'd play quite well as a striker. I think at this point, though, Arteta hasn't tried it. It's probably not going to happen. If Arteta thought this was the case, I think we'd have seen it at some point by now. But yeah, I think Martinelli's finishing, when he's instinctive and when he's on form, he hits the ball very quick with not a lot of backlift. I could see him scoring, but yeah, I don't think Arteta's going to do it. If he had, it would have happened by now.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think he is, in Arteta's view, an out-and-out left winger. I mean, just if you look at the pitch yesterday, and you look at everyone on that pitch, he is hugging that touchline so intensely. Like he's the furthest, widest player. It's quite obvious that he is the outball. But hopefully, you know, whether it's playing from the left, whether it's playing for, you know, a bit further in, which for the record, I don't think either of us think will happen. But so long as he's able to get back to scoring goals, to getting assists, because his finishing is a very underrated part of his game. You know, when he's putting the ball in the back of the net, he is incredibly clinical, but we just need to see more of it, and hopefully we will. And last question from Fiona Scott. Hope you're doing very well, Fiona. Will we sign a striker before the end of the transfer window? Take it away, Dem. I'll let you have that one.
I don't think we sign a striker. I think if anything, we will get a winger in that can play right and left. I really don't see. I think Arteta's fine with Havertz and Jesus up top. I think it will be someone that can play on the right and left if we get anyone at all. But as far as I know, I don't really think we're linked to that many people at the moment.
No, and who's out there? Like I can't see a striker that I would expect Arsenal to splash a load of money on and be that kind of Declan Rice ready-made player that's going to come in and just do the business straight away. And also, why would you take Havertz out? Because I thought yesterday wasn't his best game, but just look at his work rate. You know, he came back, tackling back for a tackle. I thought he was fantastic. So I'm quite comfortable and content with Havertz being the main man and having Jesus and even Trossard as the guys that can fill in as and when need be. And given Havertz's pretty injury-free career to date, I think we can rely on him. So yeah, I'm not interested. Well, I'm not overly interested in Arsenal signing a striker. It'd be nice if we could sign a Gyökeres or Osimhen, but I don't fully believe that that's the answer. I would be much happier with. I mean, Nico Williams would be the dream, wouldn't it? But just a wide.
That's the one I want.
Yeah, it'd be lovely. It's not going to happen. Definitely not going to happen.
Yeah.
But just someone that could be a Trossard type player, you know, around the 30 to 40 million pound mark that could come in, provide goals, provide assists, and fundamentally be a different option to what we've already got. Someone, you know, that can bring out the best of Martinelli, who can provide competition. I think that's what we really need. But on that note, Dem, I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate that you're coming to us all the way from Dubai. And it's, what time is it over there now?
Must be 11 o'clock. So it's not too bad.
11 o'clock. Yeah. So I've definitely kept you on longer than I should have done. First and foremost, thank you for joining us at relatively short notice as well to be part of this podcast. And of course, for staying up late in the Dubai heat. I hope it's not too bad for you out there. And where can people find you if they want to keep up to date with you?
Yeah, just on Twitter, Demi_V. Yeah.
Lovely. Fancy doing it again?
Yeah, whenever. Just let us know.
Fantastic. That's what we like
Always
to hear,
up for
Demi.
it.
Well, we'll make sure to.
Us.
No, don't mention it. Don't mention it at all. Like I say, me and Demi met 7 years ago, and I don't think we've done the podcast together in a long, long time. So it's great to have you back, mate. And we'll be sure to do a few more of these throughout the course of the season. But like I say, it's definitely getting on a bit over there. So I'll leave you to it. Make sure you go and follow Demi on Twitter. As mentioned at the start of the podcast, please do check out Roofbeck Art on both Twitter and Etsy. From myself, from Demi, see you later, guys, and up the Arsenal. Bye-bye.